The many fantastical worlds of D&D have borrowed countless icons of pop culture and genre fiction. One specific edition on that list seems totally incompatible with the swashbuckling, spell-singing world of Greyhawk or even the Forgotten Realms. That genre is cosmic horror. From the works of H.P. Lovecraft to more modern works riffing off of the same ideas with less of the, let's say, backwards thoughts driving some of Lovecraft's original works. Cosmic horror is a genre that explores the horror of things beyond the comprehension or understanding of our world. These threats could be in the past, the future, or even from outside of time. But altogether, they're united by a few primary features. Cosmic horrors are outsiders. Their mere presence in the world is often toxic to the living, and almost always so unsettling that it can fracture the minds of those who see them. They're also powerful beyond our understanding. Even the weakest creatures in cosmic horror are usually just the fringe edges of some greater threat that could easily wipe away the world if it ever wanted to. Finally, they're uncaring. The horrors and antagonists of cosmic horror don't care about us or even our world. Their interactions with humanity are brief and usually just one small step in a larger plan. The archetypical example is, of course, Cthulhu, the Great Old One. The more modern versions of Cthulhu usually display Cthulhu as an octopus-faced kaiju that likes to cause mayhem. But the original version is even more strange. Cthulhu is a godlike being who seems to protect an impossible city buried beneath the sea. It cannot live or die until the stars are right, and then it becomes real and seeks to conquer the stars with its star spawn, depending on which story you're reading, of course. Many who see it die of fright, while others just immediately go insane. You may notice that this doesn't exactly sound like something a party of level 10, or maybe even level 20 could tackle. Well, that's really where this gets started. The strange alien presence and intense descriptions of cosmic horror monsters make for fantastic enemies in games like D&D. But their sometimes unkillable and typically uncaring nature often tends to be shaped or trimmed down to something more manageable. The result isn't really cosmic horror, but is instead something exciting to fight and to run in a game of D&D. An alien villain from outside reality seeking to stake claim on our world and accidentally causing terrible destruction just by being present is a terrifying foe that challenges the party to take on something that doesn't necessarily follow the rules. We're going to look at the lore behind 3 D&D monsters and discuss the tropes they use to make for cosmically horrific encounters. There are plenty of other monsters that borrow from cosmic horror in D&D. You could even argue that the demons of the Abyss are the closest to the real thing. More on that in another video. But instead, these are just some of our favorites. There aren't many monsters as iconic to Dungeons & Dragons as the Beholder, a great floating ball of scaled flesh, sporting a single huge eye above an equally large mouth and covered in 10 eye stalks, each of which can fire off its own magical beams. Some are simple charm effects, while others are horrible disintegration rays that can turn a hero to dust in a single unfortunate turn. These creatures are famously paranoid and xenophobic, and they make enemies of every being they meet. Already we can see where cold indifference is better replaced with paranoid hostility for a monster in a game like D&D. These floating abominations are native to the Far Realm, a plane beyond the scope of the normal planes of existence where strange and mysterious forces slumber and hunt. This otherworldly environment follows the Beholder into our own plane to some extent. Beholders live in great and cavernous layers that they create using their disintegration beam. As a result, these layers should be very difficult to traverse. A floating creature would have no need for steps and even be motivated to make them as complex as they can. Describing the perfect precision of the walls and the alien way in which it's formed is a great way to set the scene for your party. These terrifying creatures were inspired by a dream of Terry Kuntz that ended up in Greyhawk, and most sources claim that it's the only point of origin. However, knowing that the works of Lovecraft and others have influenced D&D and fantasy in general, there are a few influences that we think not only inspired these original versions, but also influenced the choices that would come later. For those who already know the lore of Beholders well, you may know where this is going. The first piece of cosmic horror that really feels linked to Beholders is Azathoth, the blind idiot god of the Cthulhu mythos. Azathoth is described and depicted as a roiling mass of flesh dominated in form by a massive mouth and covered in eyes. Azathoth gave birth to most of the other Great Old Ones through fission, spawning them as if from nowhere, and dreams and thoughts of Azathoth supposedly create all things. And so it's this uncaring, unfeeling, eternally hungering being from beyond that seems to make reality itself. Now taking a look at the Beholder, they are an angry and confused species from beyond the realms, covered in teeth and eyes and craving new trophies and a fresh hunt. Fairly similar, right? But these similarities grow as additions continue. Beyond its original appearance, the Beholder begins to take on more traits of the good old nuclear chaos, another of Azathoth's names. Namely, it begins to dream, and by dreaming, reshape reality. Soon enough, it's revealed that a dreaming Beholder changes and warps reality to suit its alien mind, creating strange effects up to a mile away. Even more directly, it became true that Beholders reproduce by dreaming of other Beholders, and thus spawning them into being, alongside a whole menagerie of Beholder-like creatures that can spawn around the lair of these terrible tyrants. If you're going to add a Beholder into your campaign, take a moment to consider what effects this outsider has on the player's world. What strange dreams have already begun to leach into nearby towns, or even the city it hides beneath. When planning its lair, think of the alien shapes and geometry that would come from something so foreign to our own plane. With so much freedom to move and create, what would it mean? What kind of plans does a being have when its dreams can literally reshape reality? Finally, if you want a real challenge, spare a thought in your homebrew world for where these terrible creatures come from. Somewhere in the cold vacuum of your world space, is there a dancing, rolling, idiot god that dreams these things into being? Or does some other obscure and dangerous corner hold the secret to these foul beings' grim reality? A frequent favorite of 5th edition and beyond, the Mind Flayers, or Illithid, are a quintessential D&D monster. These cephalopod-faced harbingers of doom sail the astral sea and beyond with terrible power. The Illithid have a passion for experimentation and treat any people that are not other Illithid as food or as experiments, with no concern for the autonomy of others. Baldur's Gate 3 fans will also be well aware of the alien way that these creatures reproduce, a terrifying process called seromorphosis, where a tadpole consumes the brain of a host and warps its body into a mind flayer. The Illithid live in great hives, where they speak and commune with an elder brain, or a juiced-up Illithid called an Ulitharid. Now, beyond the grim reality of their need for brains, the Illithid are a strange fallen civilization. The spaceships we see them fly in, called nautiloids, are almost universally lost to time, and most Illithid can't even repair them anymore. These terrifying creatures exist only in their weakest form, fleeing from the species and peoples they'd once enslaved. This is another trope of cosmic horror, the realization that the powerful foe you've barely escaped is only a feeble shadow of the real threat that it once was. In temperament, the Illithid are closer to the dispassionate villains of cosmic horror than the Beholders. So, to make them more interactive, they're tied to the mortal people of the world through their constant need for fresh brains and bodies. The Illithid borrow from a few other major tropes of cosmic horror as well. Their most immediate connection is in their appearance and, quote, technology. Mind Flayers' tentacled mouths were, in part, a reference to the burrowers beneath, giant worm monsters with tentacled mouths, but they also bear a striking resemblance to the spar spawn of Cthulhu outlined in books by multiple authors, with their tentacled mouths and strange, almost mammalian bodies. The parallels between the deep sea and the potential creatures of space is another common connection in cosmic horror. Second is the psionic weapons that they can wield, powerful in their own hands, but useless in humans. Baldur's Gate steps around this through some tadpole shenanigans, but in a more traditional encounter, it creates another moment of alien power. A simple stone or length of metal is a deadly weapon in the creature's grasp, but is just a trinket in your own. The major piece that Illithid tie into is through their seromorphosis and experimentation. Creatures like Brain Hulk stand aside a parade of creatures bent into miserable shapes by the Illithid. From the Gith to the Brain Hulks, we see the long and terrible effects of their service. We even get a slice of what's inflicted on a human by Mind Flayer work, in the form of the distorted Grimlocks. This is where we hit a real trope of cosmic horror. For Grimlocks to exist, the Mind Flayers must have contacted humans before and then bent them to their will. So on what far-flung world were humans found? What already dead civilization of humanity spread into the stars, met the Illithid, and then lost? What hope can there be if this fight was already held once and the Illithid already won? This bizarre web is part of why the Illithid are so well designed for D&D. For every experiment and plan, a dozen quests can come up to attempt to stop or slow the extraterrestrial threat. Weird science and twisted monsters can make for exciting and novel encounters. Not to mention a favorite NPC could be found already turned into an Illithid. Leaning into those alien goals can help prepping adventures, and for those who find that Illithid go down in combat too quickly, remember the Beholder. Any creature that can levitate at will would also design their layers and ships to use that levitation. And here we have one of our personal favorites, the Aboleth. Aboleths swim in great pools beneath the surface of our world, seeking worship and obedience wherever they can get it. It can even project itself physically a mile out from its lair and read minds to discover the dreams and desires of various people, making it essentially a perfect anglerfish for guiding in new servants. The Aboleth transforms the creatures around it quickly, resulting in the servants of the Aboleth being slowly made into better and stranger creatures for it to utilize. Those that swim too close can end up losing their ability to breathe air, forced to live the rest of their lives underwater. If they keep swimming and get close enough to touch its tentacles, their skin will become translucent as they're covered in the same slime as the Aboleth, unable to leave the water safely without their skin drying and cracking apart. These effects indicate that the Aboleth seek to make a world and a people in their own image. In ancient prehistory, the Aboleth ruled the people of the world without gods. They had a great empire and spread across the plains before history even began. They arrived on the great floating city of Zifu, which was ruled by Aboleths and settled at the bottom of what would become an ocean. Another parallel with Cthulhu and his city of Relaya. In the end, they were driven to the ground by the gods, forced into hiding deep below the surface of the world. Now they slumber and bide their time, waiting for a chance to take back what was once theirs. With the ability to puppet the servants for up to a mile, they can even begin to reach out into local communities, looking for some way back to the light. The Aboleth and their slimy, transformed helpers call up memories of shadows over Innsmouth, the transformed townsfolk and the undersea creatures they served. These fallen, almost gods show a terrifying history to the world, and their eternal memories give a chance to deliver some mind-breaking perspective to a creature foolish enough to communicate with one. Maybe the party needs an ancient secret and is forced to barter with an Aboleth. But you have to ask yourself, what can an ancient being like this ask from the party in return? In using these creatures and their ability to read minds and communicate through telepathy, you can open up a world of possibilities. Servants maneuvering or controlling a town as the party is led increasingly astray. A temple to a god of the water receiving strange new visions. There are options abound. It can also be interesting to play with the direct nature of some of these abilities. Maybe your Aboleth sings into the deep rather than literally projecting its image, a haunting melody bringing in strangers rather than promises of riches. What does it have to promise or offer with its infinite memory? Adding an Aboleth to your campaign is like taking a piece of history brought from the dawn of time straight into your adventuring party's present. If this Halloween season you're in need of some horror from beyond the stars, take a look at any one of these alien abominations. Explore the strange dreamed reality of a beholder as it sets its eye on new targets. Chase down a colony of mind flayers in the midst of a terrible experiment that could bring ruin to the land. Hunt an ancient Aboleth as its villainous machinations expand to dangerous heights, while trying to avoid being transformed in the process. Pack a punch of otherworldly terror as your party goes off into an alien landscape, and don't forget to stay foolish. What are your favorite cosmic horror-inspired monsters? Are there any you're hoping to see in the future monster manuals? Let us know in the comments down below.